It's no secret that Tony Soprano is something of a scumbag. He's not only a vicious criminal, he's an adulterer, a neglectful parent, and has personally killed many friends and family members. The show is unapologetic in showing Tony's moral decline, and we, the audience, are supposed to be horrified by his actions. However, one thing that's often brought up in his defense is the fact that he loves animals. It's supposed to be a redeeming quality, showing that despite all of his other issues, he has a core of decency. However, I do wonder if Tony really does love animals as much as he says, or if it's just another part of the persona he puts up to shield himself from all the horrible things he's done. Let's take a look. Now, there is no doubt that Tony likes animals. In the pilot, he becomes obsessed with the ducks that have landed in his pool. He builds them a ramp, and even buys food to feed them when they come back. Later on, Tony becomes attached to Pyomai, the racing horse that Ralphie buys. Despite the fact that Ralph is her owner, Tony worms his way in, not only taking a cut of her winnings, but also demanding that Ralph pay for very expensive vet care. When Pi gets sick, Tony also stays with her all night. When Tony meets his father's mistress, he learns that his father was forced to give away his childhood dog Tippy because of his mother Livia. Tony is deeply resentful of this, and even though he comes to sympathize with his mother after getting to know the mistress, he ultimately continues to hate her because of this act.
Gave my dog away to his girlfriend's kid. Big fucking deal. If it was up to her, she would have had it killed.
On the surface, it seems like Tony really loves animals. However, the question then is, why didn't the Soprano family ever have any pets over the course of the show? You would think that since he loved animals so much, they would have had a dog or something. Now, AJ mentions that they had a dog when he was a kid, but it was hit by a car. And you could say that given Tony's reactions to the death of animals, he might have been too grief-stricken to get another dog.
That's because I know what it's like to lose a pet.
There's also the possibility that the writers never gave them a pet because it would have made production a lot harder to film with needing an animal handler. However, even if we accept that, I actually think that there's an in-character reason. Tony's fixation with animals is actually a way for him to deal with the trauma in his life without facing the actual source. The animals serve as a way for him to experience the grief and compassion that he can't in his life as a mobster. In the pilot, Tony becomes devastated when the ducks in his pool eventually fly away. Melfi identifies that the ducks remind him of his family, and personify his worry that one day he will lose them as well.
I'm afraid I'm gonna lose my family. I think I lost the ducks.
By taking care of the ducks like he does, it's like he's taking care of his family. But this only obscures the fact that Tony doesn't actually provide much for his family aside from money. He's often not there for them emotionally, and when he is, he's often a negative presence in their lives.
Wherever you were, it couldn't have been more important than letting your son know that you care about him.
No, only you care. Fuck you.
No, fuck you!
There's some beautiful symbolism for this in the fact that Tony hides money from his family in the bird food for the ducks. Even his supposed love of animals is corrupted by his greed and secrecy from his family.
40 grand from the bird feeder.
Bird feeder, listen to yourself. You sound demented.
It's like Tony is aware of how bad he is as a father, and the ducks are a way of coping with that fact. The same thing holds true of Pyomai. Tony is devastated when she dies in the fire, and, blaming Ralph, kills him over the issue. The show leaves open the question of whether or not Ralph killed Pi. Now, David Chase has since confirmed that he did set the fire, which I actually don't like. I prefer it remains an open question, because I don't think it matters whether he did or not. Because Tony did not kill Ralph over Pyomai. He killed him because of Tracy. Tracy was a stripper at the Bada Bing that Ralph was dating. She tried to reach out to Tony for advice and support, but Tony kept her at a distance. When Ralph eventually kills Tracy after a fight, Tony is so shaken, he breaks the mob's rules and hits Ralph.
You out of your fucking mind laying your hands on me? This is the boss of this family. Shut the fuck up. I'm a main guy!
It's clear he blames himself partially for her death, and when he talks about Ralph hurting an innocent creature, he's really talking about Tracy.
The beautiful innocent creature, what did she ever do to you?
There are further details to support this. When talking about Tracy's physique, they call her a thoroughbred, which is a term used for horses. And when Tony dreams about Meadow in a test dream, she's replaced by Tracy in his mind, viewing her as something of a daughter figure.
Anything will ever happen to you.
Everybody, come on, dinner.
The grief Tony feels over Pyomai's death is really his displaced grief over what happened to Tracy. Melfi correctly calls this out in their therapy.
You haven't grieved in this way for people. Your mother, your best friend.
Because of his profession as a mobster, Tony deals with death all the time, and often he's the cause of it. He can't show grief or compassion, as that would be viewed as weak. So instead, he projects those feelings onto animals.
Can't I just be sad for a horse without some touchy-feely, Freudian shit component to it?
But even though Tony shows more empathy for animals instead of people, there is still the question of whether those feelings are real or just a performance. In Season 6, Melfi reads a study about criminals. One passage in particular states that the criminal sentimentality reveals itself in compassion for babies and pets. This, along with other events, leads Melfi to believe that Tony is not genuine in his therapy, and is instead performing the emotions he thinks is necessary to appear normal.
Yoshelson says they sharpen their skills as con men on their therapists. Crocodile tears, what have you.
Now, this has led to a lot of debate among fans about the psychological nuance of Tony's character. People argue whether he was a psychopath or a sociopath, and if a love of animals proves or disproves either case. But honestly, most viewers, including myself, really only have a surface level understanding of the differences between those two terms. And the show itself doesn't have the best track record in presenting psychology in the most accurate of lights. Melfi uses Freud and dream analysis as a major part of her treatments, when most psychologists agree that it's an outdated practice. So I'm taking everything the show presents about actual clinical psychology with a grain of salt. But I do think that the larger message of this study, within the context of the show, is for us, the audience, to question the truthfulness of Tony's emotions. Tony is a master of lying to everyone around him, including himself. He goes out of his way to convince himself that despite all the bad things that he's done in his life, he's really not a bad guy.
Because I'm a good guy. Basically. I love my family.
And I think the same holds true for Tony's love of animals. Though he might care about animals to some extent, in reality, it's just a mask for his deeper problems. And at the end of the day, I don't think Tony really loved animals. Not the ducks, not the horse, and especially not that motherfucking animal Blundetto.
Trees, ducks, what the fuck are you, Ranger Rick? I'll tell you, some job you shrinks got, you think everybody's lying to you while you're pulling scams on them. Fuck you!
Amazing thing about patrons is that they reproduce spontaneously. Obscuration Media, Daz J. Kit, Sam Cedarland, Celery Man, Jenna Marie Johnson, Brad Smith Studios, Uncle Mike, Matt Joyce, Countess von Zarevich, and Luke P.